Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me in welcoming our webcast viewers. My name is Gillian Riley, and I'm honored to be the president of the Canadian Club of Toronto and your host for today's event. Our club offers members and guests a diversity of opinions that reflect the multidimensional nature of Canada's rich democracy. Here, we offer access to dynamic political, business, and public figures. The leader of the Conservative Party of Canada is one such figure. Before I formally introduce him, here's a quick snapshot of some upcoming events at the club. Celebrate the holidays with us on Wednesday, December 13th, with the writers, composers, producers, and director of the Broadway sensation Come From Away. We'll be here to talk about the award-winning and heartwarming Canadian musical. And on Thursday, December 14th, Bank of Canada Governor Stephen Poloz will be at our podium. To order your tickets or to learn more about the club, please visit our website at canadianclub.org. You can also join the conversation via Twitter and Instagram by following us at CDNCLUBTO or by using that hashtag. I would like to express sincere thanks to today's event sponsors: Borden Ladner Gervais, represented by Sean Weir; and TD Bank Group, represented by John Prato. Thank you very much for your generous support, too. I also want to acknowledge the youth and young leaders table that are with us today, thanks to Bell Canada. We have the Monk School of Global Affairs. Please stand and be recognized. Thank you for joining us today. And now, our guest speaker. Members and guests, let me remind you, if you have any questions or comments for our speaker, and he is very, very excited about taking questions, so please jot them down, and our staff will collect them. Our guest speaker has been on the job for 6 months, traveling from sea to shining sea to present his plans for prosperity. Andrew Scheer became the leader of the official opposition and leader of the Conservative Party of Canada after a long, hard-fought leadership race. The Ottawa native has been a familiar face on Parliament Hill for the past 13 years. In 2004, the father of 5 returned from Regina to his hometown to enter federal politics. As the Member of Parliament for Regina, the former insurance industry representative was re-elected 4 times. Mr. Scheer held the position of Speaker of the House of Commons from 2011 to 2015. In this role, he earned the distinction of being the youngest Speaker in Canadian history. After the 2015 election, Mr. Scheer served as the official opposition House Leader before entering the Conservative leadership race. Now, as Conservative Party Leader, he welcomes the opportunity to share his vision for Canada. Now, I'd like to share something I just learned today at lunch with Mr. Scheer. He banks at both Scotiabank and the TD Bank. Mr. Scheer, the Canadian Club of Toronto podium is yours.
Well, thank you very much for that very warm welcome. And Gillian is right. I do bank at both Scotiabank and TD Bank. I owe both of those institutions a heck of a lot of money. And I told John Prado and are in the holding room there that I often pay off the credit card I have with his bank with the line of credit I have with the Scotia Bank. So it's great to be at a table where, in essence, I guess they're buying me lunch today for all the... It's great to be in Toronto. There's certainly always a great buzz when I come here. I have a lot of fond memories coming to Toronto. As many of you may know, my mom grew up in Mississauga, just right near the Port Credit GO station. And Port Credit, great neighborhood, just off of, actually on Cawthra Road, just off the QEW. So I have lots of great fond family memories of taking the GO train in to see Blue Jays games and going to the X. And there's always a great buzz and excitement when you're downtown. And there's certainly a winning sentiment in the air. You know, I got to congratulate Argo Nation on a great win last week. Last Sunday. I understand Toronto FC just won and they're in the finals. That's great. So I know there's a lot of people in Leafs Nation hoping that this is contagious, that this is going around. So. Always risky to show your allegiances in hockey in Canada. I grew up in Ottawa, so we won't get into a... Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you. This is... Yay, Lisa McLeod is here from Ottawa. Great. It says... Fantastic. Great to see you here. Well, as many of you know, we did finish a very competitive and exciting leadership race for the Conservative Party of Canada. I think at one point there were 16 candidates all competing amongst each other, good friends, colleagues, former colleagues, who all went out and tried to win. And in doing so, we got a little bit of criticism from some in the media. You know, there'll always be some articles or some columns talking about how there's just too many people running for the Conservative Party. There's too many candidates. And it did make for some challenging environments when it came to the debates and things like that. But, you know, I kind of reflected on basically what the message that those criticisms were saying. They were basically saying that there are too many people willing to sacrifice time away from their friends and family and go out across the country and bring new people into the Conservative Party of Canada. There are too many people who are developing innovative policies and going out and spreading them amongst Canadians to try to re-engage in areas where we lost. There are too many people going out and selling and signing up new members to grow our party. And along the way, the Conservative Party of Canada grew from about 75,000 members to over 250,000 members strong. Those are problems I like to have as a leader. So on May 27th, I was selected after 13 rounds in a very competitive race, and I immediately hit the ground running. I wanted to get right in there that first week and show that the Conservative caucus was united, that we were focused, and we were ready to hold the Liberal government to account and start building the case to earn back the trust of Canadians in the next election. The House sat for about 3 or 4 weeks, and then it was off to hit the road over the summer. Now, I wanted to spend those first few months really just listening. I think it's very important for any government, any political party that loses an election to really understand why. We have to approach this part of the electoral cycle with a great deal of humility. Clearly, we need to improve in some areas. Clearly, there are things that we did last time that we need to address and do more things differently and some things better, and some things maybe less of. So that's what my plan was for the entire summer. And then on July 18th, the Liberals gave the Conservative Party and the opposition an issue to go out there and talk to Canadians about. On July 18th, the Finance Minister tabled his tax measures. Now, the tax measures were originally presented as a series of consultations, but those consultations came with draft legislation. They were far beyond just consultations aimed at getting feedback. They were specific policy proposals. And what we witnessed as a result of that was a slow but steady, good old-fashioned Canadian tax revolt. People from across the country, aided in many cases by local chambers of commerce and professional associations and groups like this, started sharing the information and promoting the advocacy that was required to push back against these measures. And it wasn't just the substance of the reforms that caused so many people so much concern. it was the divisive and insulting rhetoric that came along with it. And my first message to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, that first day back in the House of Commons after the summer, when I was talking about all the plumbers and roofers and interior designers and farmers and professionals I had met all across the country, was that these hardworking people are not tax cheats. Because that really was the language that the Liberals were using. If you think back, we know that they were throwing around lines, saying that these measures were necessary because so many people weren't paying their fair share, that many people had set up businesses just to avoid paying higher taxes, and that many of these tools were only available to those who could hire people to set up fancy accounting schemes. Well, I really liked watching the reaction to that, and especially on social media. We're living in an age where people from across the country can get united around an issue very, very quickly and express themselves and work with groups and individuals in faraway places in many different areas and different walks of life. And one of my favorites was, as I was landing one day, I was going through my Twitter feed and I saw a picture someone had tweeted out, and it said, "Hey, at Justin Trudeau, it was a farmer in a tractor. It said, 'Hey, Justin Trudeau, just here in my tractor, in my what you call a tax shelter, trying to get the crop off before the frost hits.'" There's another one of a shop owner opening up the doors for the day, saying, "Hey, at Bill Morneau, just here trying to avoid paying my fair share of taxes for the next 9.5 hours." And it was really that type of rhetoric that I think prompted that reaction and helped with the pushback. But when we look back, I think we have to acknowledge that the Liberals weren't entirely wrong. Justin Trudeau and Bill Morneau weren't entirely wrong. There were some wealthy Canadians who were using fancy accounting schemes and high-priced help. To arrange their fares to protect their family fortunes and make sure that it wouldn't be touched. It just so happens that if Justin Trudeau and Bill Morneau wanted to find those people, all they had to do was turn slightly towards each other, gaze into each other's eyes, and they could have left the 1.4 million hardworking business owners alone for the summer. I was so passionate about this issue because it really resonated with me personally. I grew up in a very, very middle-class family, working-class family. My mom was a nurse. She was one of the original nurses at the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario. For those of you that have lived or worked in the Ottawa area, that's an iconic institution for pediatric and healthcare for young people throughout Eastern Ontario. My dad worked for the Ottawa Citizen, so he's got a post-media pension, so everyone keep your fingers crossed for him. I don't want him moving in with me, so please go out and subscribe to any paper you like. You don't have to read it, just have to subscribe to it. But they often had to make sacrifices. They had to make tough choices. I can literally remember the day. My dad's an avid reader. We had our whole basement was a library, books everywhere. He subscribed to literally dozens of magazines. And I remember the day that he canceled all his magazine subscriptions so that he could pay for my sister's dance lessons. I remember the time that he arranged for a loan from a friend when interest rates were double digits so that he could keep our family in the house. Those were tough choices. It's not easy to go to a friend and ask for money to pay down a mortgage so that you can stay in the house. And they always made those sacrifices so that we could have a better future. And they were very generous. When I turned 18 and I was accepted to the University of Ottawa, my parents were very, very generous. They said I could live at home for free. And that was their contribution to my post-secondary education. I shouldn't say that. They did buy me a bus pass. They bought me a bus pass every month because my family didn't own a car. We didn't have a car growing up. I had to take the bus everywhere. And I believe that I learned kind of the first stage of my ability to persuade people, because if you think it's easy to get a girl to go out on a date with you when you're promising to meet her at the transitway station, you really need to have a good pitch on that. So to pay my way through university, I had to get a job. And the job I got at the end of high school, I'd worked at some of the Ottawa Rough Rider games and Ottawa Senators games. I'm really thrilled. I love the CFL football. My first job was at the Ottawa Rough Rider games. When I moved to Saskatchewan and people would say, who do you cheer for in the CFL? I would say, I've always been a Rough Rider fan. I'm really excited about the prospect that Halifax might get a team. I think that's fantastic. I hope they call the team either the Blue Bombers, the Stampeders, the Eskimos, the Argonauts. One of those names would be very fitting in our Canadian history. But I got a job at a restaurant, and I was a waiter. Started off as a busboy, then a waiter, and I saw that I had that opportunity. I could pay my tuition because I had a job thanks to a small business owner who had risked everything, literally put all his savings on the line. I'm not sure the entire degree of his personal financial background, but I know that he took a big risk in opening up that restaurant. And as that restaurant succeeded, sure, he succeeded, he prospered, but so did I. I was one of the primary beneficiaries after he himself that benefited when that business did well, that allowed me to pay for my tuition. When I moved to Saskatchewan in 2003, I found a job at a local insurance company. A husband and wife who had literally sold the farm a few years before to open up an insurance office. I didn't have any training. I didn't have my brokerage license at that point. They gave me on-the-job training at the front desk, paid for my way through the Canadian Accredited Insurance Broker Program so that I could get my certification. And there were dozens more at that firm just like me that had started down that path in life because of the risk that those owners took, that they risked everything to open that up. There's no guarantee of success, but thanks to the fact that they were successful, I benefited. I was the primary beneficiary after they themselves in that situation again. And I saw in both those situations, stressful evenings, those owners staying late far into the night as they tried to, figure out how they would make their payroll or submit their GST filings, or when they got the StatsCan business survey that they were forced to fill out. These are all big burdens on local business owners, and they do it, and when they prosper, millions more succeed. So our message throughout the last few months was these attacks on small businesses, these new tax changes, not just about the 1.4 million Canadians who own a small business. It's about the millions more who have opportunity thanks to those hardworking risk takers, those dreamers, those strivers, and those people who work up an hour before their employees do and stay 2 or 3 hours later. This isn't just about the business owners, it's about all the people who work there. And that's why this was so passionate for me. And the trouble sometimes with economic stats is when you look at negative news, when things don't go well, you can always read an article about how many jobs might be lost when a company closes or a factory shuts down. But you can very rarely quantify the millions and millions of lost opportunity when investment never happens, when business decisions aren't made. And one of the things I've heard so much throughout the last few months is that there's basically been a freeze in the business community with the uncertainty, with the lack of clarity, with the lack of knowledge of what the new rules will actually be. And we will never know how many people didn't get the phone call saying you got the job. We'll never know how many people weren't given the types of opportunities that I had thanks to these liberal tax changes that have stifled so much economic activity. So that's the problem. We have a government now that is so focused on pitting one group of Canadians against another, dividing Canadians along these types of lines, ignoring the fundamental principle that prosperity is contagious, that success breeds other success, that we can all do well together, that you don't have to create losers in order to create winners. And this attitude of always trying to tear people down in the name of building people up has to stop. Prosperity can't come from government. The best thing that helps lift people out of poverty, the best people that helps improve the quality of life for all Canadians, are free people making free decisions buying and selling, exchanging goods and services voluntarily. That is what creates wealth and prosperity. I like to use the example of television sets. I'm an avid TV watcher. I love movies. I love TV. I love watching shows with my kids, binge watching Netflix, and I'm going through The Simpsons right now with my 12-year-old, pre-screening, making sure that the jokes are all appropriate. But you know, about 30 years ago in the 70s, 40 years ago now, the top-of-the-line best TV you could buy would cost the average worker around 2 weeks' worth of salary. Take you about, the average worker, average wage based on Stats Canada, it would take the average person about 2 weeks to be able to afford that television. That's if they didn't buy anything else. If they just put everything they had into those 2 weeks, they could buy that television. Today, it takes the average worker in Canada 2 days to buy an infinitely better product. Now, that didn't happen because we had a minister of TV fairness. There's no royal commission on innovation, and there was no speeches given about we'll get you 500 channels in every living room and a chicken in every pot. It was because the free market worked. The people who made the product continually tried to improve it and find more efficient ways of producing it. And as a result, lower income Canadians, people who 40 years ago wouldn't be able to buy that television, now have a better product thanks to the magic of the free market, thanks to voluntary exchange. Every single voluntary transaction in a free market enriches both the buyer and the seller. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. That is the only way that you can create prosperity. The government cannot come along and look at the economy like a giant computer console and start pulling levers and switching dials and saying, well, we'll have a little bit more innovation there, and maybe if we create a supercluster over here, we can have growth and improve the quality of life. It is free people making free decisions. It is hardworking business owners creating those opportunities for those that don't have the skill or the means to do it themselves. It is the risk takers. It is those who are willing to put everything on the line, and if they fail, to pick themselves back up and try again. We benefit thanks to that economic engine in our society. Now, when we see the Liberal approach, we see the exact opposite. We see the Liberals trying to do that. And the fundamental thing that I've learned over my last decade and almost a half in federal politics is that the very people that the left claims to help are hurt the most by their policies. That they're very good at making an announcement. You know, we had an announcement the other day of billions of dollars in new housing, a new housing program. Much of it is left unfunded and left to the provinces to decide how to pay for it. And at the same time they're doing that, this Liberal government has pushed the dream of home ownership out of the reach of millions of Canadians with the new changes to the CMHC. I had a question in the Kitchener-Waterloo area about funding innovation and the Liberal government taking big bets on different aspects of the new economy. And I said, yes, sometimes there obviously there's a role to play to support infrastructure and research and things like that. But the hundreds of millions of dollars that this Liberal government has announced in that particular field will pale into the comparison with the lost economic activity when it comes to a new carbon tax that will siphon off wealth from every single industry in our country, or higher CPP payroll taxes that will make it harder for workers to keep their job as business owners have to make tough decisions. So this is what we see with this government, always making things harder for the very people they claim to help. So I've still got a few more months leading up to the next election, about a year and a half now, before we're into campaign mode. I can assure you that the Conservative Party of Canada will be putting forward a robust series of policies that will speak to the practical effects of the challenges that Canadians face in small towns, big cities, in every province, in every territory. Because I believe firmly that Conservatives don't need to change our message from one place to the other. We don't need to change our product. Our Conservative principles of greater individual freedom, of trusting the private sector, trusting the free market, trusting the rest of society beyond government, I know that will work everywhere from coast to coast. When you think about one of the biggest problems with the left is that they fail to recognize that there is more to society than just government. A great example of this is how this government has changed the program to welcome refugees from around the country. They put in an artificial cap of 1,000 privately sponsored refugees. Now, I had supper with the Archbishop of Toronto just a few weeks ago at his annual dinner. And Archbishop Collins said that the Archdiocese of Toronto could do so much more. And I know there are faith groups all throughout the GTA. There are community groups, there are individuals, there are volunteer groups that would like to do more. But the government has artificially capped that and expanded the government program. Why? Why shut out those who are willing to do that out of their own free will, out of their own sense of giving back to the community, out of their own sense of charity and compassion for those around the world? My mother-in-law volunteers with a group called the Open Door Society in Regina. They've done such good work, all volunteers, welcoming people from all around the world. Real practical things, helping people get their driver's license, helping people get enrolled in English language training, renewing health cards and things like that. You couldn't pay a bureaucrat to do that kind of work. There isn't enough money in Ottawa to pay bureaucrats to do the types of things that individuals in Canada want to do and would do more of. So a big part of my message too is, in order to create the prosperity that I know is untapped in every part of this country, in many cases, is just to get government out of the way and let individuals do what they want to do. I know I'm running out of time, so I'll close very quickly. I'm excited to get out there and continue on this work and advance the next election. I hope you'll be engaged. I hope you'll provide me constructive feedback where I need it. And I hope that in 2019, you'll vote for a positive Conservative message that is focused on building up every single Canadian and ensuring that every province, every person, everyone from every walk in life can share in the potential and prosperity this wonderful country has to offer. Thanks very much.
That was just my... That's impressive. That's the first standing ovation I've seen this season.
Oh, fantastic.
Now, there are a few questions here for you.
Fantastic.
So I'm going to start with the first one. How does your campaign candidacy differ from that of candidates before you? What will be the key to your success?
Well, I really do think that the Conservative Party has identified some of the things that we didn't do well in the past, and our campaign will be very different. We ran a series of very effective, very well-designed campaigns throughout, from 2004 on, and obviously we've learned some of the lessons that didn't work last time. I don't like to look too much about what happened in the past. I'm more of this is an opportunity for me to write the next chapter in the Conservative Party of Canada. But I think we're going to try to take advantage of some of the tools that have just exploded. Speaking to different groups of people through different platforms, social media, new tools. I mean, I was just getting the hang of Facebook, and then everyone told me that, well, now everyone's on Instagram, so doing that now and learning a bit more about Snapchat and things like that. But I think what we really have to do going forward is to always frame things in that positive light, to always talk about how not so much the things that we're against, but the things that we're for, and making those practical connections between the principles and the philosophy that guide the Conservative Party of Canada and how it affects people in their lives. In other words, provide people with an aspirational message. I don't think that voters ever say thank you at the ballot box, and it's really not their job. You know, that you don't, you're not there, when you go and put an X beside someone's name, your job is not to thank someone for a job well done. You're choosing what the next 4 years will look like and what you want it to look like. And I think that's the key for the Conservative Party in the next election, is to really have a robust set of aspirational policies that really capture the imagination of everyone of every age and every region.
Great, thank you. So, how does Canada remain relevant on the world stage? What are your plans to make that happen?
Well, I believe we need to go back to having a principled foreign policy that stood up for what was right, unafraid of denouncing evil where it exists, and less concerned about trying to please others in the international community, and more concerned with promoting and defending Canada's national interests. I could run down a long list of examples of failure with this Liberal government. You know, we just recently had a much touted announcement on UN peacekeeping. We had, the Prime Minister teased this out, and everyone was waiting for this one, this ground-shaking, earth-shattering new policy. And what was the policy? Can anybody tell me? It was a few hundred troops that the government would give to the UN, and the UN would decide the mission for us and tell us what it would be, and they would serve under that command. I've called for Canada to lead the way for a peacekeeping mission in Ukraine, where we can stand up to Russian aggression in the region. I don't know what Stéphane Dion meant when he, the Liberal government's first foreign affairs minister. He said that Canada would have responsible conviction. So when you have convictions and when you have principles, you need to be responsible with them. You can't show them too much or in every situation. And I don't believe that's the right way to go. I think one of the things that most Canadians really appreciate about the previous Conservative government was that we were unafraid of denouncing evil where it existed, promoting Canada's national interests, and always making sure that we stood up to those around the world that are intent on promoting and spreading evil.
We now have a question from one of our students from the Monk School of Global Affairs, and it reads as follows. Last month, Brookfield Institute released a study that 40% of Canadian jobs could become automated over the next 10 to 15 years. What should Canada do to prevent mass unemployment? And there's a few other questions around AI in here as well, so
yeah.
It seems to be a common theme.
Well, AI is something that I'm certainly learning more about, and I think it will present a challenge. I tend to look at this as if it happens organically and naturally in a free market, then that's one thing. But when it happens and if it's accelerated as a result of policies that make it harder for industry and businesses to retain workers, then that's another thing. So I will confess, I go to McDonald's far too often, and the last time I was in there, I didn't give my order to a human being. I punched it into a computer. Now, there are many reasons for that, but if some of those reasons are artificially imposed impediments to hiring or retaining workers, in other words, if governments are making labor more expensive, then is that a good thing? Disruptive change will happen. There are no longer anyone who makes buggies, and we have an auto industry thanks to that. So yes, we can identify certain areas that may go through disruptions, but as human beings constantly innovate and find new ways of doing things, producing things, we're always better off for it. We always have a better quality of life and more prosperity because of that, if it happens naturally. If government starts trying to pick winners and losers, if government starts making it artificially harder to retain workers and humans in jobs, then that's another thing. And I think we need to have a serious conversation about why is there so much investment going into AI and automation. And I think one of those factors is because at many different levels of government, it's become very, very expensive to hire workers. Before you can even pay the wage, you're paying a lot of taxes, payroll taxes, and other types of things. So we need to have that part of the equation has to be looked at just as much as the innovation side.
So speaking of technology, how do you differentiate yourself and your party to the selfie generation against a PM who is focused on selfies and social media?
That.
I didn't write it.
It certainly is a challenge. I do think that we have a very image-conscious prime minister. There's no doubt about that. And I think it's important. Everyone in every level of politics will say, it is important. A lot of times people communicate more with images than with words. A picture can say 1,000 words, and sometimes a social media graphic will get shared more than a 500-word essay on the rising cost of natural resource products. So we have to be cognizant of that. But I do think that more and more Canadians are realizing that substance should matter over selfies, that policies should trump image. And while it's fun to kind of peer into people's lives and follow people in the national eye from coast to coast and throughout their daily lives, it's the decisions that are made that actually affect our lives that we should care about. That's what people should be basing their decision on who to vote for in the next election. And we have a challenge in the Conservative Party. Some of this, we didn't do enough of as we need to do. So we are working on improving our ability to communicate on those same platforms. But I do believe at the end of the day, a good product will always trump a good sales pitch. That sales pitch matters, and it's important to get that right, but you actually have to be offering something in that pitch.
So one last question. And it's for everyone in the room here, it's very relevant. If you have it your way, what would Ontario look like in 5 years, in 10 years?
Are we talking politically or?
I get it. I didn't write it.
Look, I got to tell you, one of the things that was so frustrating for me when the Conservative Party was in government was constantly, we would make these changes. We would lower taxes. We would find ways to attract new investment. And almost at every turn, the Liberals here in Ontario would undo the good work that we were doing in Ottawa. And now the architects of the Ontario economy, the disaster that is the energy programs that are rife with scandals, the high tax rate, the hydro rates that are pushing people. I met with a manufacturer in Markham during the leadership campaign, plastics manufacturer who sold into the auto supply chain. I think he said he had about 3 dozen workers or so. He had already cut his shift down to 4 days a week just because of hydro costs, just because of the rising cost of hydro. That's less hours for those workers. That means that they all had to take a pay cut as a result of those high hydro costs. So I think if there's one thing that we need to make sure happens in Ontario, because Ontario is such an important economic engine for the rest of the country, and so much of the national prosperity, we are so interdependent between provinces. We have to make sure that we have a government in Ontario that understands the fundamental economic building blocks of this country. And I don't think the Win Liberals have a very good record here in Ontario, and now we're seeing the results of that. And unfortunately, the architects of all that has gone wrong at Queen's Park have set up shop in Ottawa and are now running the PMO. So we have our challenges at the federal level.
So I'd like to invite John Prado to come up to the stage because he's going to do the thank you. And while he's on his way up, thank you very much on behalf of the Canadian Club. So over to John.
Thank you, Jillian. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Prado, and I'm honored and privileged today to give thanks to our honorable guest. First, Andrew, I want to thank you for choosing public life. You've had a distinguished career in Parliament as an MP, as a distinguished speaker, as a leader of the opposition, and you're getting ready to be the next Prime Minister of this great country. All of us in this room and across the nation are in a better position today because someone of the highest integrity and highest ethical standards and intelligence has chosen public life, and we thank you. We know it's not easy. Second, after hearing you today speak, we are all excited. Today we heard a different vision for our country, a different path for Canada. And that is important to hear differing views. You stated today that we are less than 2 years away from the next federal election. In fact, it's 689 days. And today, we heard loud and clear that Canadians will have a clear chance and choice to a different view. Merci pour avoir partagé notre vision pour notre pays. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you. Today's meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon.